Republican Senator Bill Hagerty of Tennessee adds his voice to the conversation now as he joins us from Capitol Hill. Senator, it's great to see you. Thanks for joining us. Do you have a red line in this debate?
No, I don't have a red line. The only red line I have, Joe, is not to get ahead of the negotiators, because we've got one negotiating room. And this is a debate, a discussion, and a negotiation between President Joe Biden and Kevin McCarthy, in my view, and the people that they've designated to do it. I've been a business person my entire life, and I know you can't negotiate from outside the room. All you can do is make things more challenging for those who are trying to get to a result. So my red line is to step back and let the negotiators do their work right now.
Well, Senator, how much confidence do you have in the negotiators? There's been a lot of projecting of optimism in the last 24 hours, but I wonder how optimistic or still concerned you may be that we may either get too close to the limit or go over that cliff.
Well, Kayleigh, I would have been much happier if we'd started negotiating in earnest much sooner. That's very unfortunate that we are here at the time we are. But given that fact, I feel good with the fact that they've actually narrowed the negotiating table right now, that Speaker McCarthy and President Biden have both put people at the table, a small team at the table, that have the capacity and the competence to do this. Garrett Graves, a very strong member of Congress. He's going to do a great job in this. You got the OMB director and the White House senior advisor there that President Biden, I think, has a lot of confidence in. So I think the right people are at the table right now. So from a process standpoint, I am optimistic that you've got the capacity now to get to an answer. Let's just make sure they get it done now.
Senator, we just heard from a few of your Republican colleagues next door in the House at the beginning of this conversation about work requirements. This has become a major element of the conversation. Do you support the framework that Speaker McCarthy is offering here when it comes to additional work requirements for SNAP and other social programs?
Absolutely, I do. And the people in Tennessee do as well. When you look at the requirements, they're not unreasonable at all. We're talking about able-bodied people between the ages of 19 and 55. Working a minimum of 80 hours a month, roughly 20 hours a week. It could be job training. They could be going to school, doing something for their community. But that's an effort to try to get them more into the workforce. It's going to be good for the recipients, and I think it's going to seem much more fair to those Americans who are subsidizing these payments.
Of course, this is something that the president addressed before his departure toward the G7 summit in Japan, Senator. He did say that he didn't necessarily want to see work requirements tied to health benefits in particular. But on the subject of his departure to Japan, there was a lot of conversation as to whether or not he should be making that trip. Obviously, it is a shortened one. He won't be attending that Quad meeting. Do you think it is right that he goes to the G7 this week? Is it important for America looking beyond our borders?
Certainly, I'll go back to what I said in the beginning. I wish that these conversations had taken place earlier. I wish that we had this wrapped up before he got on the plane to fly to Japan. At the same time, though, America has a role to play in the world, and we are desperate on a global basis to have America stand strong as a leader. This G7 summit is an opportunity for the G7 leaders to come together to talk about China's coercive behavior, to stand up against it. I think that's an important message to send to, and America needs to be a leader there, not absent from the table.
So just to put a finer point on that, Senator, as the former ambassador to Japan, what signal would it send if Air Force One did not show up in Hiroshima?
It would not be a good signal, Joe. I think that, again, we have a role to play as the leading superpower in the world, a responsible superpower. Again, I wish that we'd taken care of domestic issues like this debt ceiling earlier. We should have. But at the same time, this is a role that the president needs to play. He should be on that plane, and I think it would be very, very damaging were his seat empty at the G7.
Okay, Senator, so we've talked about one issue we're facing here domestically. The other one that has been persistent over the course of the last several months is the issue of the banking system and the stability of regional and mid-sized banks. I know you introduced legislation last week, the Depositor Protection Act of 2023. How confident are you that that legislation can reach bipartisan support in the Senate?
Well, it should, Kelly. We're going to have the supervisors back in front of us again tomorrow. This is an issue of great concern. And it's a deep concern of mine that we precipitated this situation because of the behavior of our regulators. I think the San Francisco Fed, the supervisors there, were asleep at the wheel. The FDIC allowed an auction to fail the weekend that SVB went down. This is a major concern. It put us into uncharted waters. As a result, we've got uncertainty throughout the banking system right now. So my bill is aimed at addressing that uncertainty, calming the waters on a temporary basis and allowing the regional banks to stabilize. They are repositories of great clients, great accounts. What we don't need to see is this unintended consequence of people getting concerned, runs on banks, and forcing these too big to fail banks to get even larger because customers panic and move their accounts from these regional sized banks. We just need some stability right now, and that's what my bill aims to do. I do think there should be strong bipartisan support to get to an answer here.
Well, this is a rare bit of action we're seeing come out of this, Senator. We've been in touch with you since the day after SVB failed here on Bloomberg, and I remember that Twitter video you shot from right in front of the bank. You were out there in California that day. We're going through more hearings again today, and most of what people are hearing is that the former CEOs are keeping their money. The Federal Reserve is investigating itself and might make some changes to its regulations, but no one's actually going to be punished for this. Am I wrong?
That's what I'm hearing as well. I do think that the senior executives are going to go through the grinder here. And you're seeing it take place. It happened yesterday here in the Senate, today in the House. That is going to continue. So we'll see what happens in terms of disgorging any profits that they made, or the activities that they undertook in the days, weeks, and months leading up to this. I'm certain that there will be investigations there. But I think the other thing not to let go is the fact that we had the FDIC essentially fail an auction. And you and I have talked about this before, Joe. And my legislation goes at addressing this. We should have been talking on the Monday morning after SVB failed. We should have been talking about a new bank and a new name on the door. They allowed the auction to fail and again put us into uncharted territory, creating massive amounts of uncertainty. Those costs are going to have to be taken into account as well. And we need to get to the bottom of where the regulators failed, where the supervisors, I should say, failed, and how this process unfolded over the weekend with the FDIC that's in charge of addressing this. Allowed what should have been a weekend process to spill over into weeks following and create all of this uncertainty.
Senator, you will have another chance to question the FDIC chair in a hearing in the Banking Committee tomorrow, as well as other regulators. What can you learn from them this time around that you didn't learn when you spoke to them in March?
I want to keep digging in. One of the things I found out from the president of SVB yesterday was that the regulators were working from home. When I went to there, and Joe, you mentioned me standing in the parking lot of SVB in California. I was there that weekend that the bank failed. My expectation was that the management team would have been there working around the clock, trying to help facilitate the auction and the sale of that bank, trying to make sure that this minimized the burden on the American taxpayer. That didn't happen. And what the president told me yesterday, what the SVB president told me yesterday, was that he was cut out of the process. He was not even consulted. Now, I'm unhappy with his performance, but he would have known that asset a lot better than a supervisor at the FDIC.
Yeah. All right. Well, we will all be watching tomorrow's hearing. Senator, thank you so much for your time this evening. Of course, that's Republican Senator Bill Hagerty.